I got the notification.
You're live. All right, can anyone see us? You'll have to speak into this one. You'll have to speak.
Hello. Hello, is there anyone there? Can you see us? Can you see our screen? Hi, guys. Hello, folks. Anyone there? Yeah, hi. Mohsen? He cannot speak. Yeah, let's see.
Please tell them to use the chat window to communicate.
Yeah, guys, you can use the chat window to communicate with us. So we are about to begin the webinar. So you must be seeing the chat window to the right? So you can communicate with us. You can anytime you have any questions, you can raise those questions in the chat window.
No, you have to keep your screen minimized always.
Hello, guys. Can you just say hi if you're there? You should see a chat window to the right. So you can type in your questions in the chat window. So we are about to begin the webinar in just a couple of minutes. You could just type in a hi so we know you're there. People will late.
Yeah, we'll wait 2 more minutes and then we'll start.
How many people are there?
Hmm?
How many people are there?
Right now only our guys are joined.
Hi, Moshe, can you hear us?
Hello, Mohsen. Yeah, am I audible, Mohsen? Can you hear us? Yeah, okay. Yeah, clear. All right. Then we'll begin.
We are about to begin.
Shall I introduce myself?
Yeah.
No, through the camera. Hi Mukesh, welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, let's start.
Okay, so let's get started. So we have planned this webinar at QCode, and we'll be going through, basically it'll be an introduction to HTML and CSS today. So we are offering a course that's a front-end web development certification course that includes HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, Bootstrap, and Angular. So this is we are conducting a series of 4 webinars as a run-up to this front-end certification course. So every Thursday at the same time, we'll have a webinar for the next 3 weeks, total of 4 webinars. So let's get started. So basically, we are going to deal with front-end development in this course. So front-end is basically what the user sees in a web application. So a web application consists of 2 parts, or a website consists of 2 parts. So one is what the user sees as pages in the browser, and one whatever process happens in the backend, that is in the server side. So in this course, we are going to cover only one half of web development, which is the front-end part. So in the front end, there are 3 basic technologies: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So today, I'll try to cover the basics of HTML and CSS, and then move on to this portfolio application. So it will put together all our learnings, and I'll try to complete this portfolio, sort of a personal portfolio that you can build for yourself. I'll go about how to actually build it. So let's get started. So as I was saying, the basic 2 technologies for building the front end for websites or web applications are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is used to structure the content. So whenever you have a web page, let's say you go to Wikipedia or something, so you see a page with a lot of content, right? So if you visit some page, so this is the content on the page, but the content is not presented just as plain text. You'll see that it has been structured. There's a certain structure to it. You can see that on the top there is a navigation bar. There's things to view, edit the page, and all. On to the left you have some more links, and in the center you have the content, and then you have images on the page. The content is structured properly. You can see there's a heading here, and then there are paragraphs, and so on. So there's a table of content with a lot of links here. Clicking on the link, you go to the particular section. So that's the content of the page. You have a lot of content, and then you're organizing it in a particular layout. So you have the navigation menu on top. You have a sidebar with a lot of links. You have the main content. You have a table of contents, which is in a rectangular on the screen, as you can see. So the content is also organized, it's structured, and then it is beautified. So you can see, for example, on the right side, you have Donald Trump, his details at a glance. And so it has been structured sort of like a table, right? Born this year, political party this, and so on. So structuring the page is another thing, beautifying it is another thing. That is the work of CSS. So those are the two technologies. For the content, we have HTML, and for the laying out of the page, where each element on the page should go, up, down, left, right, and beautifying it, what color it should have, what background it should have, that's the work of CSS. Let's get started with building a basic HTML page. So the plan for this webinar is basically, first we'll start off with HTML, cover some of the basic HTML tags. Once we cover the basic HTML tags, we'll be in a position to move to CSS and actually make the page better looking. So after that, we'll move on to the portfolio page and see how we can use all of our learnings to actually build the portfolio page that I just showed. So let's get started. So before we get started, you require an ID. I'm assuming all of you have some kind of programming experience. So you'd be accustomed to using an ID or a nice editor. So I'll be using VS Code. So if you want to download VS Code, you can go to VS Code, just search for VS Code. You can go to code.visualstudio.com. It's a free and open source editor for Microsoft. So you can use this. It has very good support for JavaScript, which is why I use it. So if you are familiar with something else, you're comfortable, you can continue using that. So I'll be using VS Code. So let's get started. So I'm going to create a basic, I'm going to create a folder first. Okay, so let me just create a folder for today. So I'll call it Webinar 1 Live. All right, and let me open this project at this folder. This will be my project folder. I'll open it in the editor. All right, so we have an empty folder. Within this, let us create our first HTML page. All right, so I'll create. I have to click here to create. So I'll call it intro.html. Let's see some of the basic HTML tags. Let's see how to write an HTML page. First of all, an HTML page ends with the .html extension. All right, and the first thing that will be there on an HTML page is plain text. Okay, so you can use any editor to type it out. So this is called the doc type declaration. So this tells, so I won't be very deep in today's webinar. Basically, we'll be covering this in depth in our front-end course. So this webinar is just meant as an introduction. So it won't be very much in depth. So I'll just briefly mention the idea behind each of these elements. So the doc type declaration basically tells the browser what kind of HTML you're using, which version of HTML you're using. This doc type declaration essentially tells that use the latest version of HTML, which is HTML5. All right. Then HTML consists of, so whenever you want to build a page, so HTML page is basically a page that can be published on the internet. So you can create an HTML page, you can put in your contents, for example, your portfolio or anything that you'd like to share with people, and host it somewhere. So we'll also see where to host it. So HTML pages, they consist of tags. This is called a tag in HTML. It begins with the less than symbol or the angle bracket, opening angle bracket. HTML is the basic top level tag, okay, and it ends with the closing angle bracket. Tags come in pairs usually. So HTML, the opening tag, this is the opening tag, will have a corresponding closing tag. So /HTML. The only difference between the opening and closing tags is the slash. Okay. So it comes as a hierarchy. Tags come as a hierarchy. So within HTML tag, you can have certain sets of tags. So you can have the head tag and you can have the body tag. All right. So the head tag, so what is the head and body? So these are the only two tags you can have within the HTML tag. HTML is sort of forgiving, so you can use other tags too, but these are the only things that are that you are actually supposed to use. So a head tag will have information about the page you're creating. So basically, what is the title of this page, or what is going to be the who's the author of this page, or you want to describe the page so that a search engine can know about it. So you can mention all this within the head tag. So I'll keep things simple and I'll just include a title tag for now. Later we'll include some more tags. So the title of this page, I'll just say Introduction to HTML. So as I told, this is not content that appears on the page. So where does this go? Basically, the title goes in the title bar. So we are actually in a position to, this is a complete HTML page. We can actually view this page. So I just opened this, I selected the path onto my screen, but so you can see there's no content right now on this page, right? But if you see the title bar, the tab, you can see Introduction to HTML. Okay, so the title of the page appears in the title bar. So in the tab, basically. Okay, so we know what title is. And one more tag that goes within the head is meta caption. So this tells what is the encoding you use. Usually, this is sort of the only thing that you will use, so you don't have to worry. I think this is the right way. Let me just verify. I'm a bit confused on this. Yeah, that's the right thing. So there are a lot of meta tags. Okay. So the meta tag tells you what is the encoding used to store the file. Now, all IDs usually store in as UTF-8, which is basically the file format internally used, you can assume, that's used to store the file. If you go to your preferences, you'll be able to check that out. These days, all of your IDs will store files in UTF-8, so you just saw that. So that's the setting on my ID. And usually browsers, these days it's the default for HTML pages. All right, so now let's move on to the actual content. So what do we want on a page? We want to see a heading on top, right? We expect to see a heading on top, and then we see probably a paragraph content. So let me have a simple piece of content. So let's say some, all right, and then some paragraph text. I don't want to keep typing, so I'll just write a line about HTML. All right. And I want a lot of content, so I don't want to keep typing, so I'll just grab some dummy content. Usually, whenever you're developing, you use some kind of dummy content known as lorem ipsum. It's just okay, I'm not able to see my screen properly. There's some problem. I'll just grab some lorem ipsum text from. Okay, just some dummy content. All right, so I'll just add some content here. So we have a paragraph now. Let's see how this looks like. It's already open in the browser. So I'll just refresh this page, and you already see some content. All right. So great then. So we have a page with some heading and a paragraph. Okay, this is a basic page. So These are two basic tags. Now, if you see, tags also have something known as attributes. So, two common attributes for tags are ID. You can give an ID for tag. So, some sensible name. For example, if you are working for a company, you may be identified by your nickname or your name. So it's something unique that identifies this element. So tag's ID is supposed to be unique, and element's ID is supposed to be unique. So if you give an ID of page title to this h1 tag, this h1 element, then no other element on this page can have the ID page title. Right? So attributes come in pairs. They are basically key value pairs. So ID is a standard attribute, which is used to give a unique identifier for an element. And then you say equals, and then again optionally double quotes. You can omit the double quotes also. And then and then give the ID. Okay. So ID is one of the attributes. So why do we have to give ID? So I'll just begin a small introduction to CSS also. Basically, we want to target these elements and do something with them. For example, I may want to target this H1 and change the color of this H1, this heading. H1 basically stands for heading level 1, all right? Similar to H1, there are tags H1, H2, H3, up to H6, all right? So they progressively get smaller. They're subheadings, you can say. So if I had a subheading, let me just show first how it looks like. So you see that the subheading H2, heading level 2, is actually smaller in size. Now, these things are actually getting their styles. So it's getting bold, right? The heading is being rendered in bold. And they have different sizes. So all this is because the browser gives some default styles for these elements. For certain elements, browser gives some default styles. For example, if you just inspect, so your browser has something known as the developer tools. So that's, as a developer, as a front-end developer, you'll have to develop HTML pages, and then you'll have to debug them. You'll have to probably check how JavaScript is executing and so on. So the browser gives you certain tools known as developer tools. You can just right-click and say inspect, or click F12, type key in F12 on Windows. So you will see that for this element, H1 element, there is a certain font size that the browser is giving. So you can see here on the right, it says user agent style sheet. User agent refers to the browser. So it's the browser style sheet or the browser applied styles. So that's why your heading and all is getting bigger font size. So it's 2 times the normal size. That's what is said here, 2M. So we'll see this in the course in detail, all this. So certain other things are also there. We'll see that in the course. So you can see the font weight is bold, which is why it is being bolded. All right. So we have different levels of headings. We have the ID. Now coming back to the ID I was talking about the ID. So the ID for the H1 element is page title. So why did we give it an ID? It's so that we can target it in maybe HTML itself, or maybe CSS, or maybe JavaScript, and do something about it. For example, if I want to change the color, what I need to do is I can target this element using its ID. The way I'll do that is I will specify a pound symbol or a hash symbol before the ID. This is called a selector in CSS. Okay, so whenever you want to specify CSS, you'll have to use the style tag. And as you can see, I've given the style tag within the head. It can come anywhere, but usually it comes within the head. All right. So this is how you give a comment in HTML, by the way. I had already given here. So this is how we give less than symbol, exclamation, hyphen, hyphen, and end it with hyphen, hyphen, the greater than symbol. Whatever comes within the style tag is CSS. And in CSS, we don't give comments like that. In CSS, we give comments like this. So just like in a language that you know, right? So it may be Java, it may be C, C++, similar thing. So So this is basically called, this is the style rule. And in this rule, yes, this portion of the style rule is called the selector. So we have selected the element that we want to style using its ID. Whenever you want to select using the ID, you'll use the pound symbol. All right. So we have selected the thing, and now how do we style it? So you will have to give within braces. Okay, this is a declaration block, and you will tell within that what is the color you want to do. Let's say we want to change the color, and maybe we want to give a crimson color to it. So there are a lot of named colors in CSS. So the CSS definition, CSS is a declarative language. So there are a lot of properties, and you'll have to give values. That's all. It's just like you work with MS Word or something. You open Word, then you select a piece of text and you make it bold. You select a piece of text, you change the text color, right? In Microsoft Word. Similarly, here we don't have anything set to select here. We are just rendering a page. So we need to select it using our code. So in CSS, in the CSS block, in the CSS code, we have selected it, and now we'll specify the styles using key value pairs. These are CSS properties. CSS has lots of such properties. There are hundreds of CSS. There are close 300, 400, 500 properties in CSS, out of which a few are important. Around 50, if you know the main ones, you'll be good to code. So color, for example, controls the color of the text. All right. So the entire color of this H1 tag, which we have selected first of all, that is going to be crimson now. So if you see, the color of H2 of the H1 tag is crimson, the top level headings. So we have a basic introduction to how CSS works. We understand now what CSS is. All right. So let's move on to some of the other tags and attributes. So I told you there are a few important attributes. One of them is ID. Other one is class. Okay. So class usually you apply it whenever you want to group certain elements. ID is whenever you want to target a certain element. Let's say I want to group these two and give them together a crimson color. But then what I could do is, instead of using the ID, I'll give the same class to both of them. This is one way I can do that. All right. So what I'm doing is I put these two elements in the same class, right? So I've grouped them. So now that I've grouped them, I can select. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to comment out the earlier styles and select it using the class. So to select it using the class, I need to use dot. So I'll say dot main heading, and then I'll say color crimson. Okay, I've commented out the earlier styles. So now you'll see that both the H1 as well as the H2, which belong to the class main heading, they have the color crimson. So I'll just refresh, and you'll see that both the headings, the level 1 heading and the subheading, both have color crimson. All right. So as I told, this is just one way to do it. And I just want to mention here that an element need not belong to only one class. For example, if you are going for, let's say, guitar classes, and you will be in a group who are joining you for the guitar class, you may go and play tennis after that. So you'll have a group playing tennis. So you as a person belong to different groups. Similarly, elements can belong to different classes. It's not that it can belong to only one class. So for example, I can add this to the class intro. I can add this also to the class intro, and I can also add the paragraph to the class intro. And whatever has the class intro will additionally have will additionally be in italics, let's say. All right. So what we're doing is we are targeting these three. Now all three, the H1, H2, and the paragraph belong to the intro class. So you can see how we specify multiple classes. We just separate with a space, right? We separate with a space here. So that's how you add multiple classes to an element. So if you see now, all three are italicized. All right. So, and by the way, if you just right click and inspect, earlier we had seen when we inspected, the styles applied by the browser, by the user agent. Now you will see in addition for H1 or any other element, you will see that apart from the user agent, the browser, whatever styles it has applied, these we had seen earlier too. Apart from these, we also have the styles that we have applied. Okay. So in web terms, you are called the author of the page. So these are the author's style sheets. So the intro class, whatever we have given, style italic. And for the main heading, we have told color crimson. Okay. So we understand some of the basic attributes and two very basic tags in HTML. All right. So with this, we can't achieve really much. The web essentially is alive because of one important thing, that is links, right? So you're able to go from one page to another. You're able to browse from one page to another by clicking on a link. Wikipedia will be so boring if you don't have links. If it just mentioned that, okay, if it gave the address and told, okay, type this in the address bar. That's not how the web works. In fact, HTML hypertext refers to documents that are linked to each other. So even in the very name HTML, there is hypertext, and that refers to the documents that are linked to each other. So how do we create links? Okay. So let's say I have two documents. So I'll just copy this content onto another page. So I'll create one more HTML page in the same directory, and I'll call it, okay, more info.html. So if you see here, let's change the title. So this is more info on HTML. And I don't want much of content, so I'll just remove all of this. Okay, and I'll just say all right, and we don't have any of this. I remove the styles, and I'll just say okay. Okay, so that's like the history of HTML. The entire web was born in this year. When I say the entire web, it means HTML, the protocol used, which we have not come to. That is how the browser and the server communicate. They communicate using something called HTTP request, and web servers. The entire concept was born in 1990. Okay, so now I want to link this page to this more info page. All right. So how can I do that? So what you can do is you can introduce something known as the anchor tag. So the anchor tag is what stands for the link that you normally refer to. So you say A stands for anchor, and then you end it with a closing tag, and it has an attribute called href. Okay. So what is the value of the href attribute, hyperlink reference? So that's basically the address of the page. So if you visit any page, for example, Wikipedia, we just visited Donald Trump's page, or some other page here. Okay. So what is the address for this page? Just like you have an address, if you want to deliver something to be delivered to your place, you would order something and give your address, and that will uniquely identify where on this entire planet your thing has to be delivered, right? So whenever we request for a document, we need to uniquely identify where on this planet that document exists, which server it exists on. All right, that may be a group of servers, but which servers it exists on, and where exactly on that server. For example, in your system, you have a lot of files. So if you have to access, you should know the folder path, right? Go to this folder, go to this folder. Similarly, this is known as a path. This entire address is known as the URL, or Uniform Resource Locator, and this part is known as a path. So this identifies, this is the host name. This is one which identifies the server. Something like, okay, this should go to this apartment. within that apartment which block, and within that block which flat. So that is identified by this. This is known as the path part of the URL. So we need to know that. So right now we are just linking to a file that is in the same folder. So intro.html, we are trying to link to more.info.html. So I'll just say more.info.html. Okay. So if it lies in your system itself, and then you can give a relative path. And when I say relative path, it is actually the path to the file from wherever this current file is, intro.html. So since it's within the same folder, I give the relative path. So you see that we'll have a link now on this page. And clicking on that link, so more info on HTML, this is the content of the anchor tag. So within the opening anchor tag and the closing anchor tag comes the content which is shown on the screen. The href is just for the browser to internally know where to take the user to when you click on that. When you click on this, you'll see that the address bar will change to that link. Of course, it will be the complete path. So at the end, you'll have more.info.html. This is the same as the previous document that we created, intro. All right, so now we are able to create two documents link one to another. We can even link to some page on the internet. It's not that we have to link to only documents that are there on our server. So we can actually link to something. So let's say we link to SKU code page. So you can do. So this is the SKU code homepage. Let me just verify that this works first. So I'll just open this up. Okay, it takes me to the SKU code homepage. Okay. So let's link it up. So I'll just close this and create the link. All right. So now if you see, there'll be one more link on our intro page. So you see here, go to SKU code. So I click on this and it takes us to SKU code page. All right. So we are able to actually go from our file to some file on the internet. So we can link to any file that's publicly there. So one important attribute of this anchor tag is the target attribute, which we'll be using in further. So if I say target equal to underscore blank, what it will do is I'll refresh the page. I click on SKU code, it will open SKU code link, the document, on a separate tab. All right. So the original tab is still there. Now you might think, okay, this looks a little dirty because I don't want these two links on the same line. I want them on separate lines. So one simple tag you can use, it's just a new line insertion, is the break tag, BR tag. So we can insert breaks into our page. So it will come on separate lines. Now at this point of time, I want to introduce one very important concept. So that is block and inline tags. Okay. So if you see the paragraph, if I have one more paragraph, all right. So I'm having some other paragraph right after my first paragraph. And if you see how it comes on the screen, you'll see that it comes on a separate line. Even if I didn't have these links, okay, let's say temporarily I just remove it and check it out, you'll see that this paragraph comes on a separate line. There was enough space here after this paragraph on this line for this content to come, but it did not come there. That is because you expect paragraphs to begin on a new line. And whenever you expect some tag to start off on a new line, like a paragraph, you start paragraphs on a new line, then such elements are given the display value of block internally by the browser. I'll add back this thing. So what are block level elements? So paragraph is a block level element. That's what I'm saying. So block level elements will not have any content before them. That is some other, just the sibling. Okay, I'll give a few terms here. This is an element, and this body is the parent element for the heading. It's also the parent for this heading H2 element. This body is also the parent element for these paragraphs. Now you understand what parent child, and this is the child in turn. So whatever comes inside the body element, opening and closing, you have all these tags, right? So these are all the children of the body. And similarly, we'll call that H1's parent is the body. Okay, they have a parent-child relationship. So whenever you have a block level element, then the previous sibling, you can see, for example, this is also a block level element. So the previous sibling, the H2, comes on a separate line. Whatever follows it, this some other paragraph, that content also comes on a new line. So you can see that this thing is on a new line, this thing is on a new line, this thing is on a new line. Paragraphs are block level elements. They will take up their own new line. They will come on a new line, and nothing will come after they end. So other thing has to come on a new line below it. Similarly, heading level elements also, as you have guessed, you should have guessed that they are also block level elements. So this is also a block level element. Okay. Now, why I'm introducing block level elements is whenever we'll be structuring web pages later. Okay, at that point of time, we'll want to say, okay, this piece of content should come on its own line. So we'll require block level elements at that point of time and put the content within that, right? So it'll come on its own line. Sometimes we want to group a set of contents and put them within a block level element. For example, I told that there is another way in which you can give a italics style to these three instead of giving the class intro to each of them. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll just comment out this. Okay, so commented is out. So we are no more applying for the whatever has a class intro italics. So this entire thing is going to be plain text. Now I'm going to show you another way to italicize. So now these three are together, right? In the code, they're together. So what you can do is you can group them as a block in a block level element. There is a tag in HTML called div. Okay, so the div tag, or stands for the division tag, basically is a block level container tag. What is a container tag? Basically, it is used to contain other elements. So you basically want to enclose some other elements within this div. That's all. It's like a bag. You go for a shopping, you need some place where you can put things inside, right? So this div is nothing but a set of consecutive set of tags which you want to style similarly. You may put it within a div tag. Okay, it's just like a bag, and it's a block level container tag. Means if you have some content before this, for example, I have some anchor tag before it. Just to illustrate, I'm just putting an anchor tag. I'll be removing that, and an anchor tag after it. Let's say after the div. Then these two won't come on the line of the div. The div will get its own place. So you can see that this anchor tag is coming on its own line. This anchor tag after the div comes on its own line. Just inspect. Okay, so the inspector will show you cleanly how much space every element is occupying. So you can see if you hover over the div, this is the space the div occupies on the screen. So this entire rectangular space is the div's. It's its house. Okay, nobody else can occupy it, let's say. So that's the rectangular space given on the screen. So block level tags will get the entire width of their parent. Who's the parent? It's the body. The body thing has that much width. I'll tell later what the orange portions and all mean. Okay. So for now, you know that every element gets a rectangular space on the screen, and your block level children get the entire width of their parent. Okay. When I say entire width of the parent, the orange space won't be considered. That I'll come to later. So the orange space, if you leave it out, this div you can see occupies the entire width of the parent. Whereas if you see something like this anchor tag which comes here, it won't occupy the entire width of the parent. For example, this anchor tag, it is after the div, but it's taking only as much space as it's requiring, right? It doesn't get even one small inch fraction area right extra next to it or before it. All right. So this is called an inline element. So these are the basic two elements that we'll be using to develop our pages. So an anchor tag is an inline element. Similarly, sometimes you want to group inline elements or you want to group a set of elements. Then what you can do is you can use something known as a span tag. So these are like brother sister. So div and span. So div, whenever you want to group a set of elements as a block level element, that is they will occupy the div will occupy the entire width of the parent element. How much ever is available, it will occupy. Whereas span is an inline element. It is used to group something like your anchor tags and all you can group using your span tag. For example, now if I wanted to style these anchor tags, now they're enclosed within a span. Span is an inline tag, and these are also inline tags, so they'll come next to each other only. So on screen, it'll look like this right now. We'll see that there are 3 anchor tags next to each other. That's because a span is an inline element. Okay, as long as there's space to the right, it'll keep adding things. And anchor tags within that are also inline, so they will not get any extra space. So you'll see that this is the space for the span, then that much rectangle. Within that, this is the space for the first anchor tag, this is the space for the second, this is the space for the third. Okay, so you can probably style them. So one more way to style things, though we won't be using that today, is you can use something known as a style attribute. So instead of giving the style tag here, all right, and selecting the element and styling it, you can directly give the style tag on the style attribute on the element itself and give whatever you want. For example, let's make this one's color as green. Okay, so the thing is, I'm not going to go into so much depth, but there's something known as inheritance, and there is some color that's defined on your anchor tag itself. So this won't work. Okay, this won't work for an anchor tag. It will work for other things. So what you can do is let's select it itself. So within the span, okay, one more way to select. Let us see. So since there is only one span on this page, okay, I'm doing this only because there is one span on this page. There's no other span tag. So you can select that element using the name of the tag itself and then tell within the span whatever links are there. So this is a little complex CSS selector than we have seen. What this means is you're going to select all the anchor tags that have the parent as a span tag, right? So these all anchor tags satisfy the condition. All these anchor tags have their parent as the span tag. Okay, so you're selecting that and then saying color green. Okay, so they're all green now. All right, so that's like the basic understanding that we require of HTML. All right, so we'll be using anchor tags, we'll be using paragraphs, we'll be using div, span, h1, and we'll also be using lists. All right, so a lot of times we want to list a group of things. For example, we need to, this is just basically bulleted points and numbered lists that you use in Word or something, right? So okay, so what we've done here is we have created an unordered list. Okay, we'll be using this element also. It's the unordered list. UL stands for unordered list. LI stands for list item. So what we're doing here is we're having a list with 3 items. All right, so li/li, ul/ul. Within the UL, we have the LI tags. So this is slightly different. It's actually a group of tags. UL and LI go together. Till now, what we have seen is just independent tags, span/span. But UL and LI go together. Within UL, you have the list items. Okay, so how does this look on the screen? So basically you have the UL here with the 3 list items, apples, oranges, bananas. So you can see that they are actually having a bullet as their a round bullet, right? So sometimes we don't want bulleted lists. We just want plain lists, okay? So there's also something known as OL, ordered lists. So if you just change this to OL, you'll see that they are numbered. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So this is the default numbering. You can change this also. You can change it to ABC. There are ways to do that. But that's not useful for us today. So what is useful for us when we'll be building the portfolio is that we have, sometimes we'll want lists that do not have bullet points. So what can you do for that? Okay, so let's put this into a class called no bullets. Okay, and we'll select such a UL using its class. So dot no bullets, and then say list style type. That's the property that controls whether bullet should be there or not and what kind of bullet should be there. So you can change the kind of bullet using this also, but right now I'm not going to show you that. So if I just say list style type none, it means that no bullets. So what you'll see here is that there are no bullets now. So the bullets have been removed, or 1, 2, 3, whatever has been removed. So yeah, we have made it UL again. So that's one thing. And one more thing that we should know about lists is that they get some styles by default. You can see that they're pushed to the right by some amount. That's because if you see what are the styles the browser gives by default, I'm just inspecting our UL. You will see that the browser by default, it gives some WebKit padding start. Okay, this is a property which adds some space to the left of the bullet points. So to the left of the list, you get a 40 pixel spacing. Pixels is a unit of measurement for your screen, whatever dimensions of everything. So my screen, for example, is 1280 pixels wide. So they're small dots like you have on TV. So your computer is also like that. So 1280 pixels there are in every row. Okay, one row on the screen. So there are lots of rows like this. So one row will consist of 1280 pixels in my screen, and there are 768 pixels totally vertically in my screen. So my screen is 1280 by 768. So 40 pixels is what you can see is this much amount. So if you don't want that also, so lots of times you don't want that. So you can just say padding 0. So that will remove all the padding. So what you'll see now is that there is no space to the left. So I need not say WebKit padding left or whatever. I can just say padding 0, which will remove paddings from all directions actually. You can even give paddings to the top, bottom, right, and all. So if you want to specify separately for top and bottom, for example, you can do like this. So padding 20 pixel, I'll exaggerate things and say padding 50 pixels on top. To the right, I will say it doesn't matter, we won't be able to see. So I'll say 0. Bottom, I'll say again, we won't be able to see. That's the last thing on the page. So I will not bother. And to the left, I'll say, let's say 20 pixels. So what you will see is on the top, there is some padding, okay, if you see. On the top, there is some space. To the left, there is some space. You can even inspect this UL now, and you'll see that now you understand what the orange portion means. So it's showing the area for the thing. The blue portion is called the content area. That's where all the text and all will come, text, images, whatever you include within the LI, whatever. Whereas the green portion is the padding that we have applied to our UL element, to our list. And orange portion is what is known as the margin. Okay, so margin, where it comes into picture, is when you have elements next to each other and you want to give some space. Now padding is still within the elements space, whereas margin is somewhat outside, you can say. For example, I can give something known as a border for an element. So I'll say border 1 pixel solid black color border. So there are different styles you can draw solid line, you can draw dotted line, and you can control the width of your borders. So what you'll get now is around that entire UL, you get a border, 1 pixel solid line border. So you can change this. For example, this is how a dashed border would look like. So you can see dashed border. So you have, now you can see within the border, on top you have the 50 pixel padding, and to the left you have the 20 pixel or 10 pixel padding, whatever we give, 20 pixel padding to the left. So this is how we specify padding. Anything which involves 4 directions in CSS, we'll specify in this order: top, right, bottom, and then left. All right. So to the right and to the bottom, we have given no padding, 0. Whereas to the right, to the left, sorry, to the right and to the bottom, we have given 0, 0. Whereas to the left, we have said 20. So it's like a clock. Just remember a clock. So you start at number 12, then go to number 3 on a clock, on a wall clock or a watch. So number 6 and then number 9 on a clock. So it goes clockwise, starting from the top. So that's about basic things. Margin, yes, I was talking about margins. So whenever you want to set up a space between elements, the same order you'll follow: top, right, bottom, left. So I can say, for example, here on top, I want a 30 pixel, or maybe I'll say it's the same order it will follow. So let's say on top you want 30 pixel. It will be applied to all directions if you don't specify the rest of the things. So top, right, bottom, left, all 4 directions, you get a margin. So we see now between this paragraph and this UL, now you have some spacing. That is the 30 pixel margin spacing. So if you hover over this UL, you see the orange area. Now we understand what the orange area means. That's basically the space between 2 elements, right? So you have the paragraph, and then you have this UL, and between these 2 consecutive elements, you have some spacing. All right. So the paragraph actually by default, it also has an orange area if you see. So that's because the user agent, the browser itself, it specifies a margin before and after. These are other properties which are very similar to the ordinary margin property. So you can see it specifies 1M. 1M refers to the same as, you can say, 1 line height. That much space will be there. So before and after, you'll have a single line space. This is what it means actually. So you'll see that before the paragraph and after the paragraph, just like in Word, you adjust before paragraph, give this much space. After paragraph, you give this much space. Now after the paragraph, since there is just 1 line space, but before the UL, that is a 30 pixel space, we're using different units here if you see. Here we are told, okay, 1 line space, whereas here we have told 30 pixel space. It so happens that 1 line is around 20 pixels or something right now. All right. So that's no, it's actually 14 pixels. It's not 1 line height. It's actually just the font size. The font size by default is 14 pixel. Every font is around 14 pixels height. Okay, that depends on the exact character, but the font size is said to be 14 pixels. So the paragraph has 14 pixels, and the UL has 30 pixels. So the maximum will be given between the 2. So 30 pixels will be given between the paragraph and the UL. Okay. So I think we have understood the basic things to actually get into this. There are some advanced concepts which I think I'll introduce when we build this. All right. So I think the basic things are there. Yeah, few things are remaining. So we'll get started with this in some time. So a few properties we should know. For example, let's say we want to central line some content. For example, this. Let's go to. Okay, what happened here? Okay, I changed the setting. Okay. Let's say I want to centerline this text. All right. So the property to centerline it will be, okay, and let's put it within an H1. I think I removed lots of things. I don't want. Okay, sorry. This is an extra thing. All right. Let's remove the entire thing. Okay. So we have this H1 tag here. So this page title, I want to centerline the text. Okay. So what I can do is select that page title and then say, we have already given it a color crimson through our main heading class. So I don't want this. It's redundant. I'll just say text align and then I'll say center. Okay. So what will happen is this heading here will get centerline. Okay, so that's one more thing we need to do. We need to know. Now let's say I want to justify this content, this paragraph. So let me give it an ID so that I can target it. Okay, I'll actually introduce some complex selectors because we'll be using that in our example. So I'll say that a paragraph which has the class intro, I'll have to style in a particular way. So the way I can do that is I'll say p.intro. What the selector basically means is it's an and. So it should be a paragraph tag as well as it should have the class intro. Okay. So only one such paragraph is there on our page. So this paragraph, I want to justify the content. So I say text align justify. All right. So now if you see this, right now if you see this line at the end, there is some space. But once you justify, or there'll be more space as and when you, so you can see there's uneven space at the end of the thing. It's just like you justify in Word. So now if you see, it's equally spread out. All right, the words occupy the entire length of the line. So that's justify. That's one more thing that we're using. Okay, so one more thing that we'll be using is floats, and I think then we'll be good enough to start, and then we'll require forms, which I think I'll take it when we do the portfolio page itself. So there's something called a layout technique called floats. All right, so let's just see that. A lot of time we'll have to get such kind of layout. Now we know only how to get layout which goes from one left end of the screen to the right end of the screen. What if we want content like this? One piece of content to the left, one piece of content in the center, and one piece of content to the right. Now there are lots of ways you can achieve this, but one popular way is floating elements. So let's see how to do that. So what I will do is I'll create a div just as a container, all right, and then I'll create 3 spans within it, all right, and put some content within it. Okay. So right now this content is basically these are all spans, right? This div is a block level element, so nothing will come right next to it or after it, but whatever comes within it, these are 3 spans. So spans are inline elements, so this content will come, wherever this ends, the next content will pick up from there. So you'll see no breaks. So right now what you will see is this. Right? You can't even make out there are 3 spans here. This is the first span actually. Somewhere here it ends. No, here it ends. And then you have the second span starting off, it ends here. And then you have the third span starts and ends here. So now we want it like we showed here, right? Like we have seen here. We want to the left something, we want on the center something, we want to the right something. So what you can do is you can use floats. Now you can achieve it in different ways. One way is floats. I'll show you one more way. So both ways will actually, no, actually only floats we'll be using. So what we will do is for the span, actually for all of this, so we'll float to the left. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select a div. Maybe I'll give it an ID, or I'll give it a class actually. I'll call it 3-column layout. I'm not sure if I can use a number in the beginning. So I just call it column 3 or calls 3. So I'll select it using this class. Okay. So I'll just select it using its class. And then I'll say whatever children it has. Now one way is I can say this. That's very similar to what we're seeing here. We selected the anchor tags which were within a span, whose parent was a span. Similarly, we are selecting now span tags which lie within an element which has class called 3. So here you can see our span tags are within a div which has class calls 3. So we are selecting that, and then we are saying float left. Okay, all three we are floating to the left. All right. Now you won't see a significant difference even now. If you see how it looks like, not much, except that everything has come to the left. It has come on its own line. Okay. Now how floats behave is an element. Now we have applied. You should be clear to which element we applied this float. So we have applied this float property to our spans, the three spans which lie within the div with class calls 3, right? So to these three spans we have told float left. Now the way float behaves is it will push this element to the left as far as possible. So since this line is too long, and to the right of it you don't have much space, right? You have very little space. The next floated element will come immediately below it. That's how floats behave. So if there is not enough, it will be pushed to the left. Basically, you can see that all three are to the left right now. So they'll be pushed to the left as far as possible, as long as they can be pushed. So if there's no space, so if I reduce the line length, I am not able to describe it properly. So okay, if you see these two, okay, now these two spans, you see how they come. I'll just probably mark it off as 1, and this is 2. You can see that these two have come next to each other. So this was pushed to the left. There was enough space to the right of it. So it was the next element was pushed to the left. Now it's not to the right side, right? It's to the left only. So it keeps getting pushed. Now this element, the third element, didn't have enough space, so it came below. So this is how floats work. But one problem with floats is usually you would have seen, for example, this UL and LI, if you see, inspect it. If you see what is the height of this unordered list, what is the height? The height is the sum total of the padding, everything, and the height of individual list items. So the individual list items are these. Apple gets that box, the oranges gets that box, and bananas gets this box. So these three list item, whatever height they require, plus whatever padding is there on the UL, together that's the height of the UL. Okay, but there's a difference when you start floating things. When you start floating things, if you just see this div, this span takes this much space, this span takes this much space, whereas this span takes this much space. But if you see the height of the parent div, it will be 0. It has no height. Okay, it's actually 1344. It says cross 0. Okay, it is 0. The height is 0. So okay. So whenever you have only floated children, so whenever an element has only floated children, so all these three spans are floated, then the parent will not get any height. Okay, so we should be careful whenever we have floated children. We have to add an extra property on our div so that things will remain good in the layout. So what we can do is for this calls 3 element, for that div, we will add this extra property known as overflow and set it to auto. I can't go into depths of this, why I'm setting this, but if you set this, it will start getting a height. Okay? So now if you see, this div also gets a height, just like your UL got a height, which is the sum total of the list items height plus padding. So this div is now the sum total of how much space these occupy. Plus, of course, it's a div, so it occupies the full width of the screen. Height-wise, it will get whatever is its children's height together, put together. Okay, so now we understand floats, we understand links. One small tag that I have missed out is we can add lines to a page using the HR tag, which is the horizontal rule. So this will just add a line to this page, a full width line. So it adds a line like this. Okay. So I think we are good to start off with our portfolio page. So we can do all of this using what we know right now. There'll be some amount of JavaScript that I'll be using for this portion, so that I'll just include it, and we'll take it up probably in one of the webinars later. So using all this that we learned now, we can build this entire page. All right. So only thing pending is these form elements, which I'll introduce as and when we do this portfolio page. All right. And one more thing, advanced thing that I probably won't explain is how this is fixed on top. You can see that as in when I scroll the page, as I scroll the page also, this thing on top, this navigation menu is fixed on top. So we won't be looking into that. Okay. So any questions?
No questions.
No questions. Any questions? Okay, so let's get started with our portfolio page. Okay, so this is how it looks like. I'll try to complete maximum of this. I'm not sure how much of it I can complete. So whenever you're given, okay, when you're working on a web page, you'll be given a design for the page. I'm not a designer. This design I've picked up from the internet, seeing different things. I've picked up what I liked, and then I've designed this page. But usually when you're in a team, there'll be a web developer, there'll be a set of web developers, there'll be front-end web developers probably who will work only on the HTML, CSS, JavaScript part and related frameworks that we'll see. And then there'll be people who work on the server side. That is, I told there are two parts to every web application. So there is the front end, which the user sees, and then there's a lot of code that gets executed on the server side. So whenever you ask request for a page, it's not that always a plain page comes up. There'll be lots of things. For example, when you check Gmail and all, there'll be your emails, set of emails that are returned. So the server has to do some kind of processing to fetch that from a database, and it has to form an HTML page and give it back to you. So all that happens. So and then apart from the front-end web developer and the back-end web developer who work on the front-end and the server-side code, there are also usually people who will work on the design of pages. They are known as web designers. All right. So they will usually give. So our course is basically restricted to front end. It's neither design nor is it the back end coding, server side coding. These two are not part of the course. So entire web development is quite huge. So it's not possible to cover everything. So within the 30 hours or 32 hours, this is what is the scope of the course. And this part, the design part, is something if you're working as a front-end developer, it'll be given to you by somebody. So some web designer would give you how the screen should look like. So they'll give you in certain formats, or there are certain tools which can be used to design this, and they'll give it to you. They'll give that to you. That will also have probably it'll have markings on what should be the font size, what should be the spacing between elements, what should be the color you should use, different things, different dimensions that you require to actually code your page, to understand how the exact design is. So this will be given to you, okay? Now your job would be generally to look at this and then write. So if somebody gives you, this is how my page should look like, you know probably in Word how to put things together and make it look like how somebody has given to you. This is the same job you'll have as a front-end developer. You'll have to look at what somebody is given to you. For example, this somebody is given to you, and decide how you are going to structure this page. So usually the best way that I have found is to look at the page from top to bottom. So look at from the top level, how you'll structure this page. So how I would go about structuring this page, or in general anybody would go about structuring this page, is to see, okay, on the top, there is this nav bar. Okay, there is this about me, and there are these links. So obviously there is a div or something that you'll have to use for this. A div is a block level element, so it's going to occupy the entire width of the screen, you know that. So I might use a div. Within the div, I might use some paddings, right? Now you go inside. Okay, let's first see on the top level what elements I'll think of. So there's a navbar on top with some elements. These are actually links. Okay, we'll see how to get this kind of scroll links, but I just added a plugin to get this. So on the top level, there is a navbar. Then there is a 3-column layout, something like, okay, I didn't show you the 3-column layout itself. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I went off topic here. Yeah, so we have these 3 spans, and I was talking about how to get a 3-column layout. So I completely forgot about that. So you float left, and then if you give a width, let's say, Okay, so now what we are doing is the width property is used to specify the width of elements. Usually inline elements won't accept a width. Only block level elements will accept a width. But actually we are giving a span a width here. Now why is this possible? Whenever you start floating things, for example, this span we have floated, whether it's block or inline doesn't matter really after that. Once you start floating things, it's immaterial whether it's block or inline. Usually inline elements like spans cannot be given a width. But here, since you have floated it, they'll get a width. So what you will see here is now you can see there is these three elements. Now you can see this span, and this span. They're coming next to each other. Why are they coming next to each other? Because we have specified for each span width of 33%. So 33 plus 33 plus 33, 33% percentage is percent of the parent width. Okay, how much ever width is there for this div? Div will occupy entire width of the body because its parent is the body. So the entire screen width almost, except for the margins. So browser width. So this span, each of these spans is going to get 33% of the width of its parent div. Since 33 plus 33 plus 33 is 99. It will fit. That's why when you float it, it is able to come next to each other. Since this is just 33% of the div, and each of these spans, so it can come next to each other. All right. So that's the most important part. That's how we get multi-column layouts like this. So this need not be 33. You can even give it a decimal to be exact and say 33 point this much, and it will do the rounding off and all. So this will now add up to 100%. So that will be more exact because there's actually a small gap to the right. Even that won't be there. So this is a perfect 3-column layout which occupies the entire width. Now sometimes you'll also want to give spacing between these. For example, here that looks like there's a space, but actually there's no space. It's just that this word, last word pages has ended. If this was slightly longer also, it might, for example, if this were like this, okay. You can see it coming too close. I don't want this much, this less space between my columns. It looks as though this is continuing on to this. Okay, I don't want that. I want to give some spacing between my columns. So what you can do to give that spacing is you can reduce the width. Let's say the width instead, you set it to 30%. Okay, and you set up a margin right. Now you can set up the margin right to, I'll set it up to 5%. But there's a problem. This is 35%. Each span is 30%. The margin is 5%. So each span is going to take up now 30 plus 5, 35% of the width. So 35 plus 35 plus 35 is going to be 105%. So the last span cannot actually fit on to the right of the second span. So what will happen is this span, the third span comes down. Now usually this is not desirable. You don't want to do this. You want to get a 3-column layout. Now we can see that there is enough space between 2 columns, but the last column has come down. So what we can do, I just wanted to introduce one more selector that we'll be using, is we'll say the span, which is the third child of its parent, I'm going to make it margin right 0. Okay. What we're doing here is we are selecting the same spans, but then we are not selecting all the spans. We are selecting only that span which is the third child of the div. So this is how we do it. So all these details I'm not going into. So we are just selecting the third span and saying instead margin right is 0. Now since this rule comes after this rule, that's one more important thing we should know. This rule comes first, then this rule comes. Now this rule is also applying to the third span, right? For any span within the div, we are setting margin right to 5%. Whereas this is setting for the third span for 0, margin right to be 0. Now which rule will win? Now there's a conflict obviously. This rule is setting for the first, second as well as the third span, margin right to 5%. This rule is setting up for the third span only, margin right to 0. In CSS, when such collisions occur, there are various rules that govern which one will win. Okay, but in this case, the rule that governs which one wins is that this is the last one in order. Okay, so going into depths of which one wins in such case of in conflicts is again, it will be dealt with in the course mainly, but here we are just, this is enough for our understanding right now. So this is the last rule. So for the third span only, margin right will be 0. So now you will see that it will be 35% for the first two, and for the last one, we have only 30%. Since we are doing this, now we'll have the total of for the three spans, 35 plus 35 plus 30. So that is 100%. Okay. So now we have managed to fit all three in the same line. Let's just verify that. If you see now, we have managed to fit all three into the same line, and we have enough spaces between the columns. Okay. So this is the only thing that we need to understand, and now you know really how to do this kind of thing also. Right. So basically now coming back to how you'll think of structuring this page. So on top you have one element, right? Below that you have one element which has some paddings probably, or a margin. You can use either to the left and to the right. Imagine this entire box here. Below the top nav bar, this entire box, one div or something is there. It has padding or margin, something to the left and to the right. Then you have a 3-column layout. Now we did equal splitting of widths. We did 33, 33 or 30, 30, 35, 35, whatever. But in this, it's not equal. What I've done is I've given 20% width for this. I've given 45% or something width for this. And I've given another 20% width for this. All right. So 20 plus some spacing in between. So 20 plus 45 plus 20 plus the spacings in between together add up to 100. That's how this works. So at the top level, let's see. So at the top level, this is the second box that we have. Then the third box here. So how would I structure this? So how I have structured, you can do it in various ways, but I'll just tell how I have structured this. So one heading or something is there, as you can see, and it has been centralized. Then we have a HR. Of course, there is some margin or padding to the left and right. I've used padding. So, or margin, I don't remember. Okay. So there's a margin or padding to the left and right. And then we have a heading, which is centralized, that we know how to do, text line center. Then we have a HR that we know how to do. Then we have how I manage this is a 2-column layout. So you can do it in various ways. For example, you can put 2 of these within one div and float, give 45%, 45%, and probably 10% in between. That will be 45, 45, 10, 100%. And in a separate div, I can give these two. But that's not how I've done. You can do it in various ways. What I've done is floated all of these and given spacing between them. So all these 4 are floated within the same thing. And I've given for every even column to the right margin 0, I have said. I'll show you how to do that. That's a small change to the selector. So first one has a margin to the right 10%. Second one has no margin to the right. We'll see how to select the even numbered elements and give them some styles. So similarly for this and this, all 4. Now they are all floated together. There was not enough space here to the right. It got occupied. So the third thing came below. Okay? Third floated element came below. And the fourth floated element had enough space to the left. It came just how much ever it was there. It came there. So this is again using floats. Now coming to this is nothing new, right? So for this box again, we have some margin to the left and to the right, some paddings. We have a centerline element. We have a HR. What we have to see is how to build this form. And then this coming finally to this footer, this is nothing special. I have floated. I'll show you, if time permits, how to actually float these elements to the right. In fact, I won't have enough time, so I may not build from scratch. What I'll do is I'll just copy paste code. All right. So I already have this ready. So I'll copy paste, I'll do a little bit of code, then I'll copy paste code, and I'll explain it to you why it's working. You should be able to understand, because now you understand CSS and HTML. So basically in the footer, we have social media links. These three are floated to the right. So they come to the right side. Okay, just like you can float left, I didn't show you that, but you can always float things to the right also. So I'll just show you that also. For example, if I just say float right here instead of float left, and I say margin left, set it to 5%, and the last one's only margin left is 0. What will happen is, in the opposite order, it will get floated. So this will get floated to the rightmost first. So this will come to the rightmost. Then this will be floated as far as possible to the right. Then this will be floated as far as possible to the right. So what you will get is something like this. Okay, so you can see the first column is actually to the rightmost. Then we have the second column. Then we have the third column. So you can also float things to the right. Okay. Or what you can do, if you want to have some element simply floated to the right, the same thing. Now there's a difference between this and this. So, for example, if this div, I'll just include some styles here itself instead of using the style tag to do it. So I'll just say this has width. So divs can be given width. So let's say this is just 50% width. So that 50% space is now going to be split up into 3 columns. Okay, so it's going to look like this. That 50%, so this is occupying only 50% of the screen width now. This second piece, the second 3-column layout. I just duplicated this into a second 3-column layout, and I restricted its width to 50%. Okay. So it is looking like this right now. Now there's a difference here. If you see, if I float this div to the right, okay, so you should understand this difference because we'll be using this. Okay. So now this entire div is the one that is floated. It's not the spans within the div, right? So that's the difference. Here we have floated the div to the right. It will go as far right as possible. Whereas here we have the spans within being floated. When you float the spans, you saw what happened. The first span got pushed too much to the right as far as possible. Then the second, then the third. Here the order is maintained though in the second one. First one. Oh, sorry, that's because of the earlier rule. So what I'll do is I'll just change these to paragraphs. So there wasn't enough space or what? Okay. Yeah, this is floated to the right. That's fine because these are not anymore floated. Earlier it was span, so this rule was getting applied. These rules were getting applied. Alright, so the spans were also getting floated. Now I changed them to paragraphs instead of spans, so those rules are not getting applied. So you can see the div is floated to the right now, and the order is maintained. First one, second one, third one. Okay, so if you set up for the span for the paragraphs, similarly, a width. Okay, I won't bother about margins and all. And you'll see that the paragraphs, they themselves will maintain the order. They have not set float. So the left. Okay. So this time the div entirely is floated to the right, and the paragraphs within are floated to the left. So they maintain the order. You can see the div itself is floated to the right, and the paragraph the elements are basically floated to the left. So they maintain order unlike this. Okay. So coming back to this thing. All right. So now we understand the overall structure. So now let's get down and actually build this. So I'll create a file. I'll call it portfolio. So in your ID, you have a lot of extensions that you can add. I use this, so I don't have to type out each and every time the basic stuff. So you can go to, in VS Code, you can go here, you can just search for, there's a marketplace with a lot of extensions, just like other IDs. You can search for, I have installed something called HTML boilerplate. So you can install that and you'll get all this. Okay, so we are building a portfolio page. Okay, so looking at this, we want a 3-column layout, right? So let's start off with a 3-column layout. Okay, as I told, I'm not going to bother about this thing first, how it's fixed on top, or maybe I'll not keep it fixed. Let's do the nav bar first. Now there's an element called nav which I'm going to use. First of all, let me use a plain div. All right. And let's get this background color. So I use this extension for Chrome to pick out colors on the page. So I just hover over, it tells me the color. So this tells me the color is the different ways in which you can express colors in CSS. We'll see that also. So it says 343434 or RGB 525252. So I'm going to create a file and I'm going to call it portfolio.css. Now we had seen how to include CSS within the HTML page. You can also create a separate CSS file and link your CSS to that page using a link tag. So this is one more tag we are just seeing now. So I'm just saying, I'm linking it to give the related path portfolio.css. Okay. So we can write all our CSS in this instead. You don't have to give the style tag because this is a CSS file and style is a tag, it belongs to HTML. So we don't have to give that, but rest all remains the same. So I'll give this an ID probably. I'll call this as my site header or page header, whatever. I'll call it site header only. And what we will do is we'll give this a background color. Now this is one more property we haven't seen. I should have taken that. So for the site header, which you're selecting using the ID, we'll say background color is RGB. This is one more way you can specify colors in CSS. Apart from named colors, we have seen crimson. So 52, 52, 52. So these are the red, green, and blue components. So any color is a combination of red, green, and blue. This is a number between, every number is a number between 0 and 255. Okay, they're hexadecimal numbers. No, they are normal numbers here when you say RGB. So 52, 52, 52. So that's the color I saw from the design. All right. So now what does this site header have? Within the site header, I have some margin to the left and to the right. Okay, I have some padding to the left and to the right. Or it can be a margin. What I'm going to do is, usually what we do is we'll introduce a div. Okay, we'll just introduce a div within it as a child, and I'll use that to restrict the width. So what I'll do is, for this div, I'll give the class of container. Why am I giving it a class? Okay, these are decisions you take when you develop the page. So basically, you can see here, for all these elements, there is a sort of an equal margin to the left and to the right. Okay, so there's equal margin to the left and to the right. All these boxes that we have decided to create. So it's better that we give a class so that we can reuse that class for each and every of these elements to give to the left and right margins. So for the class equal to container, what I'm going to do, I'm going to, by default, you know what will happen to this element, right? You know that this element here will get the entire width of the body, and this element will get the entire width of its parent div. So this is going to be full width, okay? But we don't want this container to be full width. We want to restrict that width to be only this much, right? It's the red thing is being pointed out, right? That much. So what I will do is for any element that has container class, I will restrict the width to 90% of the parent width. Okay. Usually we don't do only this much. We also usually sometimes we also usually set up something known as max width, and we'll tell, okay, maybe it should not go beyond this point also. So width is 90%, subject to just like discounts you get at let's say there's a sale, 50% off subject to maximum 250 rupees. If you purchase for 1,000 rupees, you won't get 500 rupees off. You'll get only 250 rupees. Same thing is here. So width will be 90%, but maximum it will go up to 1,060. So you're restricting that also. So, and then we will specify whatever is inside. So we have probably we can have a span for this. We can float it to the left, and we can have a span for these three things together. These three links together. These are going to be links. So let's add that. Okay. So I'm going to have a div. Anyway, it's going to be floated only, so it doesn't matter div or span. If you want, we can give span also. So about us, about. Okay, and then we'll have a set of links within another span. So we'll have our anchor tags. Okay, I'll just give this as a placeholder. This refers to the current document itself. So okay. So I'm simplifying this a bit. The markup for this page is a little more complex. I've made it more semantic, means it's more meaningful, but I'm due to shortage of time, cutting down certain things. If I have time, I will cover those parts. So let's copy this. Okay, I'll just type it out. Okay, so we have put two things within our thing. Now we have to add classes or something to float it to the left and this one to the right. Okay, so what we'll do, let's just see how it looks now. It doesn't look great because by default the browser gives some colors for the things. It gives by default for the body some margins and all. So what we usually do is we include something known as the reset style sheet. So we know that browser gives some default styles, right? So if you just search on the internet for something known as the reset style sheet, let me do that. So just search for reset styles. And you can choose any of the popular reset styles. This is a very popular reset style sheet. So you can just copy paste this code. And you can create a new style sheet. I'll call it reset.css and paste it there. We don't have to worry about what these styles are. We are not concerned about that. All we need to do is we need to include this reset style sheet in our page. And we usually include it at the top. So what this will do, this reset style sheet, is will remove all the default browser provided styles, the margins that it gives to the body, everything. So now if you see, it'll be slightly different. It'll remove even things like for the ULs, it'll remove default bullet points and all, which is good in a way because I don't want bullet points for my ULs in this page. Sorry. So now you'll see it occupies the entire width. Now because the body's margins have been removed, there's no margin on the body. Now let's add some paddings on top and bottom within the container, within our. So I don't want to add for the container any top-bottom margins because container I'm going to reuse in a lot of places. So I'll just put one more element within this div. Okay. There's also something known as a section tag. So probably I can use a section tag. It's very much similar to a div, except that it has some meaning. So it means some piece of content in your web page, some piece of content that forms part of your web page, you can enclose within a section tag. It's very similar to a div. So for the section, let me give an ID, and I'll call this site header. Or I need not have done this also actually. Actually, I'll remove this. This site header element itself, let's give a padding on top and bottom. Right now it looks very congested. So for our site header, let us give on top and bottom paddings. So padding, top 10 pixels. To the right and left, I am not concerned, 0. And since we have not given any third and fourth values in CSS, it will get the opposite sides value. So the bottom will get the top's value, and the left will get the right's value. So right now it will look like this. Okay. So slightly we got a padding now. So let's increase this padding, make it better. So if you see here, I think I've given around 20 pixel paddings. So 20. The container right now, it has a width of only 90%, but it is coming to the left. If you see all the content, so if you inspect and see, it is actually only 90% width. Okay, you can see to the right there is a lot of space extra. It's been restricted to 1060 actually. So if you want to spread out the extra space to the left and right equally, what you can do is you can set up the margins to this thing, 0 and auto. So basically on top and bottom, we are not setting up margins. To the left and right, we are telling the browser to handle automatically. And the way it will handle is it will give equal margins to the left and to the right. All right. So right now it will become like this. Now we want a color different. So we want a white color. So let's do that. For a site header, whatever comes within, we'll give the color white. Now in CSS, okay, let this happen. Okay. The reset style sheet, for some reason, it didn't remove. This reset style sheet that I downloaded doesn't remove the colors for the links, the link colors. So we'll have to do that explicitly. So the site header, okay, I'll put this thing on top just to organize it better. Okay. So for the site header, within the site header, whatever links we have, so all those links we are going to make the color explicitly white, or white. Okay, so it's now white. Let's remove the underline. So that's done to text decoration, and we'll say none. Let's load this about me to the left. So we have our about me. To target it, I'm going to use an ID. I'll call this the site header title. And I'll target this and I'll call this the site primary menu. So let's take the site header title and float it to the left. I've selected using its ID and I'm saying float left, which is not so necessary. And I'm taking the primary menu, the set of links, and floating it to the right. So right now it will look like this. Already it's beginning to look like what we want. But we have seen that whenever we float things, the parent doesn't get a height. That's what is causing the problem. So what we have to do is on the parent element of this. The parent is nothing but this container. Okay. So probably we can give this also an ID and call this the primary menu container. This element we'll have to set overflow auto. Then the element will get the height of that since it has only floated children. All right. So I put this somewhere here because it makes sense in the flow. Okay. So now if you see, there'll be enough. Okay, there's still not enough height. So if you see why, container still is not getting, so I'm not applied it properly somewhere. Primary menu container, I'm not saved the page. Yeah, I didn't save my HTML. So yeah. Now we can do further things. For example, increase the size of this. So for that, for our site header title, we need to increase the font size. So this is one more property. I missed out a lot of properties. So font size, let's say 2 times the normal size. We'll do it like this, 2M. Okay. So I'm not getting the exact font and all. Okay. I wanted to show a few more things, but let's see, this time we can do that. So now what about this? This is not exactly centered. So I'll take care of all those small things later. For example, this come exactly in the center vertically, but this is not. So some more work will be required for that, but we can at least space it out better. So what we can do is, whatever primary menu is there, within that, whatever anchor tags are there. So within the primary menu, we have anchor tags. We'll give a margin to the right. So within that, whatever anchor tag is there, we give a margin to the right, and we let's say 20 pixels. So it's spaced out. Okay, I'm not following the exact spacing here. Here you can see it's much smaller than that spacing. We can adjust that with just trial and error, or we can use some browser extensions. So we have this ruler and all, which you can install, and you can actually measure pixels, how much. So this is around 10 pixels actually. So you can install these extensions by going to Chrome extensions, by the way. So you can visit the Chrome marketplace. You would have installed, I'm sure, ad blocker, lot of general extensions we do install. So you can generally go here and go to extensions and then search out for whatever extensions you want here, and it's a single click install. Okay, so now coming, we have around 15 minutes left. Let's see how much we can do. So we need a 3-column layout that we are pretty confident about. So let's move on to the next thing. I'll create another container. I'll create one div. I'll call this the at a glance container, at a glance. All right, we need a 3-column layout within that, but there is margin to the left and to the right. So I'll put it within a container, which is going to give it all those margins. So just to recollect, we had given for our container class, we had restricted the width to 90%, subject to maximum 1060, and spread out top and bottom no margins. To the left, right, the extra space will be spread out because of auto. So we have given a container, and now within this we need a 3-column layout. So let's add divs, 3 divs. Okay, and let's give this container also an ID, and I'll identify this as at a glance container. So now whatever is the div within this, we are going to spread it out equally. So width, not equally actually, sorry. We're not even going to spread it out equally, so there's no point in giving this. What we can do is we can give unique IDs for this. So this will be the personal info container. This will be the about container, let's say. And this will be the tweets. So let's take these 3 and set up the widths for these 3. This one, the second one, and the third one. So this time they'll all be floated. So in CSS, you can also give common things, common styles together. What you can do is you can just separate with a comma. If you're going to give a common set of styles to certain targeted elements, and those those selectors, you can just separate with a comma and then give the common styles. So all 3 are going to be floated to the left. This will get a width of, let's say, 20% and a margin to the right of 5. This will get a width of 45% and a margin to the right of 5. This will get a width of the remaining. So right now we have completed 20 plus 5, 25, plus 50, so 75. So this will get 25% and no margin to the right. So according to whatever you want, you can split it up. So right now we don't have content within it. So just put some dummy content to check. Okay, so we get like this. Okay, there is some problem. That's because I wouldn't have closed something properly. Okay, it seems right.
Then slash are not good.
Where? Yeah.
21.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah. So somewhere we are going wrong with VSA, SVDA. The widths are not totaling up properly. So let's just check that also.
Margin.
Margin.
Voters, yes.
Okay. I just check once here what it's. Okay. Yeah,
Margin right is not
correct. So margin right. So I had set up the margin on all sides to 5. That is wrong. So yeah. So now we can see we have got a 3-column layout. So we have got the overall thing. Now let's get into this personal info thing and see how to build this. This is pretty simple actually. Actually, I have not taken how to put in an image. So I have to take that also. So I'll just copy the image from what I already have. Okay, so I just copied an image to this folder. All right, so now first thing we have to do within this thing is we need to put an image. So that is done using the img tag. And you give the path to the image. So it's a relative path. It's there in the same folder. All right. And then it's a self-closing tag. It does not have, just like HR and all, I forgot to mention that, does not have a closing tag. So just say slash and close it off. So if you have included the image, it will look like this right now. Okay, there's a problem in the path. .png, it is not JPG. Looks like this. Okay, that's too big an image. Images will take up their natural size. So you want to restrict them. So the way you can restrict them is you can set up a width on this image. So I'll say this ID is portfolio image. And for the portfolio image, we'll restrict it to some percentage of the parent. Because naturally, images will take up their own size. It won't depend on the parent. So width, let me say 50% of the parent, how much ever that floated element has. So now it's much better. So how do you do such things like, okay, now we have obviously have to set up some margins on top and bottom. So what we can do is we can set it up on the container. So on the container, additionally, I'm going to set up a margin, rather I'm going to set up a padding on the container. Of 60 pixels to the top and bottom and to the left, right, 0. We get some spacing after that nav bar. Okay, that doesn't look good for that thing. So I'll set it up separately probably. Okay, I'm doing a little bad markup here. I've a little bad stylings and all due to shortage of time. So others I can think it out a little better. So what I'll do is I'll generally add on this element itself a padding. Okay, much neat. So now how do you make this rounded? So there's certain things like border radius. This is another CSS property. And you can give rounded borders. You can actually use this to get a circle effect. All right. And then we can give borders for this. So I'll not go into details, but I'll just tell. So obviously there's a border on this. You know how to give a border. It's not a 1 pixel thick border, it's an 8 pixel thick border. There's something to give box shadows and all. So we can do that. And then these things. So I'll just quickly copy this. So I'm not sure how much I can actually type it out. I might switch to explaining through existing code in a bit. Okay, so I'll just complete this and then explain it quickly through our code itself. So, okay, coming to this at a glance. Sorry, not this. Portfolio image. After the image, we need all this content. Okay, so we may want a heading. Okay, and then we may want a line below it, so HR. And then we want two things together. So we want an item. So I call it item title. And then an item body or item content, you can say. Similar kind of markup I'll have to keep doing. I'll group this within a div. I'll call this class item. Why I'm grouping is, I'll tell you. Because you can see that the item and the content, item content, after that we have margins. So if I group it for that group, for that div container, I can set up a margin below it, 20 pixel or something. So that's why I've grouped it. So similar markup you'll have to give. So I'll just duplicate this and change it. I'll just complete this, then I'll take you through the entire thing. I wish I had more time. This is a long thing. I shouldn't have probably taken up such a long thing. So let's just complete this and move on. Okay, so okay. So now what we can do, right now it look like this, it look quite bad. Okay. Now we have to centerline this. We have to give some margins below this image. So let's do that. Margin bottom 20 pixels or something. And for our items or for our H3, which is within personal info, we'll make it bold. That we do to font weight and say bold. Then we have an HR and then we have items. Then the item. So item, within that title and content we have. So below the each item, I want a margin. And the item title itself should be in bold. All right. And the item content is nothing special. So, and we want to centerline the whole thing. So starting from, or let's say starting from this thing, we have to centerline. So text line center. And for this too, we could have organized this better by grouping the common styles. It looks like this, much better. Similarly, we can centerline the image also. So for image, we have made the width 50%. Same technique that we applied to our this thing we can apply. So to our container. So the extra space we can, on bottom we want a 20 pixel space. Apart from that, on top 0, left and right we want auto, and bottom 20 pixels. Right will also get auto because left is auto. So I don't require this style now. Margin 0, auto 20. This is for the image. It's not getting centerline. I'm not sure why. Okay, because that's not the only thing within it. So what I'll have to do, okay, is something like this. Guys, we're running a little late. Okay. Just let us know if you have any issues. If it gets extended by around 10 minutes, then we can have a question answer session. Okay, so for this element, we can centerline things. So everything inside it. So text align center will not only center the text within it, though the property says text, it will center even images. Any content will be centered. This is the one way we can achieve it. So what I've done is I've pushed that image within its own div, within a div of its own. And within the div, I've set centerline, text line center. So what has happened is it will align it to the image to the center. We can do some more things on this to actually get it more beautiful like this. We can give it a border, we can give it a shadow. So those are just some few other properties that we can add. Okay, and we can probably increase the font size of this. That's what is done here. Okay, so I'll just take you through the, it's, you have the general idea now. So everything is the same. So basically you're controlling the fonts, you're controlling the colors, the background colors, foreground colors, everything. So let's just go through the markup of this, all right? So the idea is the same. So I'll just open some existing code. So I'll just take you through section by section, all right? So we have seen the header sort of. Here it's slightly different. I've not used links directly. I've put them within unordered lists because finally it's a list of links. So it's better to put them within unordered lists, general. Okay, now coming to the second section. Okay, this is what we are doing. So we have seen similar to what we just did, but it's slightly different. I put, instead of putting within divs, I've put it within ULs, all right? So you can choose whatever container you want. Similarly, I've created, you can see info item, title and body, similar things. Now let's pick it up from here. Okay. So there is this about section and how we have structured it. So you can see that there is this heading and subheading. So that is structured together like this in a container. So your job is basically to decide, okay, I'll put this within this div, I'll structure it this way. That's the basic job of a front-end developer. Okay. So for designing implementing whatever layout the designer has given you. So these two things are there within H2 and H3. We have given this section title and section subtitle class. Okay. And a HR is in between. This overall container for the H2 and H3, that's heading and subheading, has the class section title container. Okay. And I've devised some general class called margin bottom large. Whenever you apply this class, basically it is going to add a margin bottom of 21 pixels. Okay. Margin bottom large. This class adds just margin bottom 21 pixels. So that's how I'm managing the spacing easily. So if you see section title and subtitle, it will be nothing special. So I won't take you through that. It will just adjust the font size all right, and it'll make it bold. And similarly for this, there's nothing great in this section, which is the objective section. Only thing we have adjusted is probably we have set the bottom margin to 21 pixels again through the same margin bottom large class. Now, I think I will skip this, okay, because this will be quite complex. So let me skip this. This will be too complex. Adding this is quite interesting probably, so I'll just show you. I'll take some time to show you because this adds a lot of value to your page, but it's actually very easy to implement. If you want Twitter feeds or something on your page, it's very easy to do. All these social media websites, they give you scripts to embed. So what you can do is you can go to whatever social media site you want. For example, if you go to Twitter, okay, I'm already logged in. Just need to go to settings, and then from there you need to go to widgets, and from there just say create new widget, create new profile. I want a profile widget and I want my profile, so you can enter the Twitter public profile. So this is somebody's profile, this is a Twitter developer's profile. I don't want that, I want my profile. So this is my Twitter ID handle, so I'll just say this and I'll say embed. When I click on this, it gives me a script. Okay, all I need to do is I need to copy that and then I need to put it into my page. So let's put it into our own page. Okay, I won't show you that, but if you see, whatever I copied is what is here. You'll see it here. You can see this is what we copied. If you see, this is exactly what is there here. Classical to Twitter timeline. It's copied and pasted here. That's all we have to do. And we'll have our tweets on our page. Okay, like this. And I put this within a container with a fixed height. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll get a long Twitter feed. So I've given it a fixed height. So if you see the Twitter container, tweets container here, what we have done is we set up the fixed height for that's all we again. Fixed height of 460. Till now we have been setting widths. Height also can be set. And we have set overflow auto. What this will do is for the extra content, you can see it through a scroll bar which will appear within the element. That's it. So you get a scroll bar when you start scrolling, and you can view the entire feed. So that's about this thing. It's a 3-column layout basically, and we have adjusted the font size, everything. So the first part is over. Of course, we did only this part, but the idea is similar. There's nothing great about this actually. Okay. So coming to this, it looks neat, but all it is basically it is a floated set of floated elements. It's actually very, very simple. So can we ask them for 5 minutes more? I'll do this. Finish off. Okay, so I'll just take you through this. All right. So so if you see how this section, okay, we have finished this section now, how it's structured, you know about us. This entire thing is done. Okay, now coming to this section, the third section, all I've done is I've added a class gray to give it a background color of gray. If you see what this will do, gray, all it does is it gives a background color of gray. This is a gray color. RGB values are equal, means it will result in a gray shade. And then you have a foreground color, the text color to be a black color. #222 is nothing but a shade of black. So that's why you get a black color against a gray background. That's all it is. And then we have 4 divs, which will basically float to the left and give some margin in between. So if you see here, okay, I've not done it through divs. I've instead used ULLI. It's up to you. So imagine the same thing. There are 4 LIs instead. Instead of divs, we are using LIs. Okay, LI is also a block level container only. So you have one UL container. We have given it a class jobs and 4 LIs within that. And if you see for these LIs which exist within the jobs, we would just float it. So if you see the styles for this, you can see that LIs within it are simply floated. Each one has 45% width. Margin right is 10%, so 45 plus 10 is 55, plus the next one to it will be 45. But what we have done is for every even child, even LI, the second LI and the fourth LI, we have reset the margin right to 0. So instead of this 10%, the first one will get 10%, the second one will get 0, the third one will get 10%, and the fourth one, again, even child, so second and fourth will get 0. So that's all it is. It is just a 2-column layout that we have implemented. Okay. Set some, again, for neatness, we have set up some margin on right, along with that margin on top and bottom we have set up. So that there is some space between these. You can see these spaces here, above this, below this. So you can see all these spaces. So that's it. Otherwise, it is a plain floated element, that's all. And then the entire thing lies in with making what to make bold, what to make plain. So we have made this bold, we have floated to the left, as you can see. We have made this bold, we have floated it to the right. That's all it is. So if you see here, there is this H3 within which we have this instructor at Q code. Okay, that we have not floated. In fact, what we have floated is this span. Okay, so if you don't float something and you float something next to it, then this will flow around it actually. This content will flow around the floated element. It will come on the same line. This content will come on the same line as the floated element. So if you see job period, we are just floating it to the right. Here, job period is just floated to the right. And we've reduced the font size. So usually we increase these, say 2 times the normal size. Here we are saying 0.75 times the normal size. And we have also adjusted the line height so that it comes, line height is how big the high the line should be. So we made it higher than usual. So it's smaller than usual, the font size, and we have made it, line height is bigger than usual for that amount of size, font size. So it actually comes neatly in one line like this. All we have done is float it to the right. So we know how this is done. It just floats, right? So pretty simple. Actually, there is nothing new in this, all right? So there is just a heading which has been centered. There's an HR after that. We have put within a container as before. And we have a form. This is something I'd like to cover, but I think I don't have time right now, all right? So I'm not going to cover this. So we are skipping forms, which is an important part actually, but which gets covered in our course, which is definitely most important in HTML. So we'll see how to build such forms in HTML. So basically how to add a text box, how to add a text area where you can have free-flowing multiple lines of content, how to have an email input, how to have a telephone input, and so on. Otherwise, this is very simple, okay? You can imagine how this would have been laid out. That's pretty straightforward. You're just adjusting the widths, font size, and all, boldness. And finally, you have this footer. Again, we have centerlined this and we have floated this to the right. Now, how I have got this icons is something I would again like to show you, but it will take some time. It is using something, I just mentioned it, using a free font library, a free icons library called Font Awesome. So this is one of the most popular icons library. Just need to download it, and it's very simple to actually add icons. You need to do something like, we see the examples how they add it. All they do is this one line of code will actually add a camera icon. That's all, whatever I've highlighted. Just need to add a class to an element, FA camera. So the entire list of classes you can find it here, okay? So you just have to include whatever file you have downloaded, just like we've included the style sheets, the external style sheet. And these are all the icons you'll find through this library. And all the names are given here and you can include it. Okay? So that's how we can go about creating a portfolio page. Okay? So we'll be sharing this, the build. Okay, yeah. So we'll be sharing this. We'll be sharing this, whatever the half-done portfolio, so that it's easy for you to understand, and also the completed portfolio, so that you can take a look at your convenience. You know the concepts. You just need to take a look and understand. So we'll be sharing this after the end of this webinar. All right, guys, that's it from me. Thanks a lot. Mithun will be Mithun will be telling you a little more about the courses we offer at SKU Code, the upcoming webinars and the courses.
Hello, folks. Glad you could join us today. Whether you joined us directly at our classroom or over the webinar on YouTube, we're thankful to have you here. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our upcoming certification course in web front-end development. This is a 4-week intensive course that will be covered by our instructor Prashant Puranik.
Shadow desktop. Yes, shadow desktop.
So, like I was saying, so it's a 4-week intense, 4 weeks intensive course conducted by our instructor Prashant Puranik. Throughout the course of this 4 weeks, we'll be going through all the web front-end development essentials like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, Angular, Bootstrap, and JavaScript itself. So we will be covering 40 hours, 30 hours of classroom training, and the classroom training will be available both on our classroom location in BTM as well as it will be available online via webinar. We'll be covering 20 hours of projects, and finally we'll be also be covering 20 hours of assignments. And finally, when you meet the project requirements, you will be handed a certificate. So our next batch for this front-end web development certification begins on July 1st. It's Saturday, July 1st. So if you're interested, please let us know. Please email us at support@sqcode.com, or you can also interact with us through our Twitter or Facebook pages, or you can join meetup.com and search for programming workshops at SKUcode on meetup.com. So that's pretty much all we had for today. And I hope you can join us on our next webinar, which will be tomorrow. We'll be covering a webinar on Introduction to SQL. So thank you, everyone, and good night. Thanks.